hadn't done anything wrong, at least nothing he could think of, but he didn't really want to think about it too much. So instead, he went into his office, closed the door, and began working on the letter. While he set out to compile a list of cases with the most sensitive confidential information, that wasn't the list he found himself writing. Bartlett v. Johnson, vindictiveness, lying. Crump v. Orozco, stinginess, stonewalling. Mikityuk v. hydration, negligence, subsequent lying. One of his most important clients of the past year was a company that was spending more money defending its dumping than it would have cost to clean it up. He laid down his mechanical pencil and looked at the page. He didn't remember having written the last 3 words, but there they were. I hate this. That night, he went to Bandera. Janet wouldn't expect him until late, and Bandera was always crowded in a way that made him feel part of the throng rather than separate from it. Not that he would have minded being alone. By this point, the anticipation had escalated to a low-frequency ringing in his ears, and he was having difficulty understanding what people were saying. Tonight it was the opposite of when he'd come with Daphne. It seemed he couldn't drink enough. He ordered a gimlet, then a vodka tonic, then a martini. He was hoping to discover the elixir that would clear his mind, sober him up. Nothing did. It was a mistake to have admitted to himself that he hated his work, and now that he had, he couldn't take it back. He could see with painful clarity how he'd wound up in this predicament. He'd enjoyed the study of law, but the practice of law had less to do with John Rawls and more to do with filing Redwells. Law school had been the classic intellectual sanctuary from certain practical considerations. Then it had ended and he needed to make a living, so here he was. When he was young, perhaps because of the premonitions, he'd wanted to be a magician. In a box somewhere in his mother's attic, there was even a photograph of him in a peach-colored tuxedo, holding a black hat and a string of knotted scarves, and grinning. As a teenager, he'd told his secret ambition to his mother, a woman who lived as though she'd come of age in the Great Depression rather than the 1950s. Dreamer, she'd muttered under her breath, but Felix had heard. Some mornings he wondered if he'd become a lawyer precisely because it was the least dreamlike thing he could be. There was Daphne. She was sitting at the other end of the bar with what must have been her boyfriend, a surprisingly preppy guy in a St. John's lacrosse t-shirt. Felix got to his feet and walked toward her, sliding his glass along the slick burnished countertop rather than picking it up. "Hello, Miss Edmonds," he said. He could see the lacy outline of a bra through her blouse. "How are you this evening?" "Bug off, buddy," said the boyfriend. Felix was eager to correct the misapprehension that he was a suitor. "We work together," he said. "Whoop-de-doo," said the boyfriend. Daphne was plucking a cherry off a toothpick with her dark fingernails. "Leave her alone. You're not her type." Felix looked at Daphne. The minx lifted her shoulders and let them fall, as if to say, "You're not. What can we do?" "Of all the... Look, pal," he said, straightening to his full height. The boyfriend laughed. "Look? Yeah, look where?" he said, surveying Felix. Felix squinted, paused, deliberated. It wasn't worth it. None of it was worth it. He returned to his bar stool and grabbed his coat, tapping his forehead in a quick salute. "See you around," he said. He was too drunk to drive, too agitated to sit still in a cab, so he decided to walk. As he swayed his way up the freeway on-ramp, he realized why no one walks in Los Angeles. All these drivers, swerving and honking, in a hurry and angry about it. It was as if they were all late for somewhere they didn't want to be going in the first place. Why didn't they just go somewhere better? Then it hit him. That's what he would do. He would change his life. It wasn't too late. He had money in the bank. Janet had a good job. He didn't have to sit at a desk growing bitter like Daphne. Clearly she was more bitter than he'd first imagined. He could switch careers, take a risk. He wouldn't have to become a magician, but he could do something he enjoyed more than practicing law. Heck, at this point, just about anything would satisfy that criterion. He picked up his pace. He felt more sure-footed. Maybe this thing wasn't something that would happen to him, so much as something he would initiate himself. But he needed a plan. A plan was paramount. He pressed his fingers to his temples and tried to think. The driver of a red Taurus threw an empty Pepsi bottle out the window and it nicked his elbow. Felix didn't care. The world, like a bride, was finally unveiling its hidden possibilities to him. He had a friend who was opening a bar and had asked him to look over the paperwork. Perhaps Felix could go in on it with him, be his partner, make it a place like Bandera. Or maybe start a restaurant that also had a cabaret in the back, for musicians and actors, even magicians. He was smiling and his heart was beating fast. It was possible he'd found the perfect solution. When he got home, he would open up, tell Janet everything. She might not like his idea at first, but she would come around. She always did. He would kiss her on the lips while she was still asleep. Then he would turn on the bedside lamp, get some paper and pencils if necessary, and show her that change was possible. Change, life, all of it. The dream of his heart was not entirely dead. There was a flicker of something true that burned within him still. It was a relief to realize such a thing. No, it was victory. It was the thing itself. Someone honked and yelled something. Felix ignored it. A feeling he recognized from his childhood had crept into his chest and was radiating out his skin. He felt utterly free for the first time in decades. It was as if the air he'd been inhaling up till now had been made of counterfeit oxygen. Tomorrow morning, he would quit his job, then he would call his mother and ask her to look for that photograph of him in the peach tuxedo. Life could still be an adventure. It wasn't too late. The cars whizzed past him, but he didn't even notice them anymore. His eyes were fixed on the moon, full and low and lovely, like a beacon, like a rolling ball of white light in the sky. It all happened so quickly, it was hard to feel anything except surprise. He got home. He closed the front door quietly. He didn't want to disturb Janet. He stepped inside carefully, feeling stealth and tiny, like an ant that had just completed a long journey. But as soon as he crossed the threshold, there she was, standing in the foyer, her eyes glossy with a happiness he'd never seen in them before, as if she'd been waiting for him, as if his adventure were just about to start.